we're talking about Sex Education, right? Sorry, I'm talking about Russian Doll for a second. Yeah.
No, Shy hasn't seen it.
I'm like, what?
Seriously?
I'm like, what tropes?
Here we are, and welcome to a mini episode of the Friday Night Movie Podcast. My sisters and I have a crazy schedule going on right now, but as dedicated hosts and consumers of pop culture, we are bringing you an episode, a special mini episode, where we are going to react to a subject, frankly, as a brother, I feel awkwardly talking about with my sisters, but hey, and that is the Netflix drama Sex Education.
I think Sex Education precisely is telling you there's nothing to feel awkward about.
Also, I feel like you've definitely said some weird, gross things on this podcast before, and this, talking about sex education, will not be nearly as bad as that.
All right, that's I'll do that. But before we get going, one of the most important Friday Night Movie traditions is the tradition of the I Told You show. And an I Told You show is when someone convinces you to watch a show and you end up loving it, and then you give them I Told You so status and call them a genius in front of everyone. And I am going to do that right now to my sister Lily. You are a genius. You get the I Told You show.
And I have to say that Lily truly, deeply, sincerely, authentically gets my I Told You show.
Really?
Because I made it about 3/4 of the way through the first episode, and I wrote off the show. I was like, I'm not going to be into this. This isn't my thing.
I didn't even know that.
I thought it was going to be, I feel like Netflix had made a few attempts with me at, like, British teen comedies that were dark and edgy, and I thought they were, like, unwatchable. And, like, a couple different shows, maybe just not British ones, but anyways. And you insisted, like, no, this is great. It's a really special show. You have to keep watching. And very reluctantly, I kept watching. And pretty much by the end of that first episode, and truly by the end of I'd say by the end of the second episode, I was just like, my mind was blown. I was like freaking out.
Wow.
How good this is. Yeah. So you
I'm
get my
so glad.
show.
I think, you know how, Becky, you prefer not to show people, like, tell people to watch Outlander, because if they don't like it, like, you can't deal. You're like, just
I just, like, I don't want to hear about why they don't like it. I only want to talk to
You're just like
it.
Right. Just leave me alone with my show.
I don't need to debate the show with you. Yeah.
Right. And I was, like, a bit worried that what if both of you didn't like it? And I would have been like, I can't handle you. Jose loved it, so I was like,
who don't like the show.
I mean, Jose, who's so picky, he liked it, and I was like, okay, I gotta get all around I Told You show for this one, because if
you get it. It's a full I Told You show.
And
there's going to be another I Told You show coming up in a future episode, but we'll save that one. We'll keep the listeners waiting.
All right. Well, I'll just give you, my reaction is an I Told You show, but I would say my I Told You show is very much not necessarily on the sum of the whole show, because at times this show kind of takes me out of it a little bit, which maybe we disagree on. But for me, the I Told You show really comes together with the fact that this might be the best ensemble of young actors I've ever seen in anything, probably since Freaks and Geeks, if not even more than Freaks and Geeks. It's like every single person in this is giving a powerhouse performance that, honestly, it's like sky's the limit for every single person who's in this show. And so for me, that, like, overwhelmed me, that, like, even though there are parts of the story that sometimes I'm like, meh, the acting and the characters are just off the charts. So with that in mind, let's talk MVPs. Who are your MVPs?
I keep, like, every week I switch. Like, obviously Maeve is a major one, and Eric. But lately, I've been, as I have time to digest the show, I've been, like, Team Amy all the way.
I know, right? She's such I love her.
I mean, she's not an MVP, but, like, I need to give her a shout out. That's a great character.
Like, for me, I feel like my MVP I'm going to go with my gut, which is Eric, because with Eric's character, I think his development and his evolution it sneaks up on you, where it starts off where you think he's this confident person who owns himself and he is who he is, but you realize that he's struggling with so much, and he has to go through this, like, you know, he has to go through like a little crisis of identity to sort of come out the other end and be that much stronger for it. And so I like the way that as a subplot, as a secondary character, they give him so much dimension. And so
and I would add that part of the case for him is he forgives Otis, and he doesn't have to, but he does.
Yes,
and
he does.
For all the hard things he goes through, he really is a truly wonderful person. And that element of forgiveness really touched me, because it could have been a twist in the show that they never talk to each other again.
Yeah,
because it would be totally reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Or that it was going to drag out, like they were going to make a thing of it, and it'd be a whole long thing,
right?
Until they did talk to each other,
like another whole season of them not being friends or something. You
right.
could easily see them doing that, and yeah. So Eric is mine. Shai, what about you?
I would say, so my main one is going to be Eric, for the reasons that we just talked about. But my secret MVP, and I'm reflecting this with my wife.
Is it also Amy?
No, it's definitely not Amy. I think Amy's funny, but when we get to tropes, I'll tell you why. Like, I like Amy, but she's not, like, she doesn't really bring much for me to the show. No, the secret MVP, and it's a person that my wife and I, Allie, talk about all the time, is Eric's father. Both the actor and that character are one of the most interesting dimensions of that program, because and especially when you compare him to some of the other father figures in the show, like the head teacher.
Like the crucial scene is when Adam sees how Eric's father behaves with him. I think that, you know.
Right, like Eric's father is not 100% accepting, but love is his overwhelming guiding beacon.
I think it's a huge difference between accepting and understanding. I think he accepts him, he just doesn't understand him. Whereas
good point.
Adam's father does not accept him for who he is.
Yeah. And so
which is actually, hold on, a really interesting theme throughout the show, that the parent-child relationship, and exactly that, Lily, the difference between accepting and understanding. If you look at Jackson's relationship with his parents, if you look at Otis's relationship with his parents, like, it's a theme that reoccurs with each of the characters.
I don't think you need to understand your teenager, because that seems to be impossible, as long as you accept who they are.
Right, whereas Otis's mother is obsessed with trying to understand him and dissect him.
Right, and it's not necessary. He just needs to feel welcome and comforted.
Yeah, absolutely. Although we'll get to Otis's mother in a second, but I think there's a certain
we know who your LVP is.
No, I think she's a good character. I think she's really interesting. I think that there's an element of her relationship with him which I feel like they didn't exactly say, which is that not only is he so important to her that she's a borderline smother, but he's almost like her muse. Like, she has had this creative block for a really, really long time. She's never felt like she was good enough to write a book again after her husband left her, and then she's able to, because of what she knows about her son and her relationship with him. So for me, there's this element where he's her inspiration that I actually, like, it's gross the way she plays it out, but I thought that might have been part of her explanation to him, that it's not just, oh, she loves him and he's her world, but that he's what helps her create at a time when she felt like she was stuck. So, all right, Lily, your MVP.
In the end of the day, it's Maeve.
All right.
I find her character extremely impressive. The way she drives a story without taking over the story. I just really, really like her a lot.
Yeah. She is really she, Otis, and Eric are kind of the triumvirate. But
every time she was on screen, I got excited as much as Otis did. Do you know what I mean? I was like, oh, she's back.
But that's, and that's something I think they deliver, because that's the type of charisma she's supposed to have, right?
Right. Right.
Like in school, she's this mysterious character, but that everyone kind of secretly wants to be a little bit like, but they don't really know what she's dealing with. And
Right.
let's use that as a segue to talk about tropes, because this show does a marvelous job bringing up tropes, playing them out kind of in a traditional way sometimes, and then also flipping them on their head. So why don't we start with Maeve? Who is Maeve like, and how does she both confirm and overturn tropes?
Well, I mean, she's the typical, like,
she's the bad girl.
Yeah,
she's
the bad girl
bad
who's
girl
labeled a
with the
slut, who's not actually a slut. You know, but I'm not saying that's Maeve, but, like, I think Maeve turns it on its head where she's like, I'm kind of a bad girl. I'm really brilliant, which is kind of goes along with the trope.
It's the archetype of the what's it called? The virgin and the whore. She's supposed to be like the slut, the bad girl, but she's so much more
complex than that.
And I think what makes her complex is that her darkness is explained, and they show it to you. They don't just tell it to you. They show you where she lives. They show you her relationships with other people. I think bringing in the brother character is extremely important to understand her feelings of abandonment, and
I also think that it turns it on its head because her darkness is not related to sex. Like, she doesn't sleep around because she feels bad about herself. Like, she's comfortable having a casual relationship with Jackson and doesn't care. Like, it has nothing to do with anything, and she's being called a slut for something that happened like years ago as a kid that was stupid and wasn't her fault and all that thing. And like, there's rumors about her, which can happen to anybody, and that's just bullying. And then she's labeled a slut, but this whole slut thing has nothing to do with her actual, like, sexual preferences, and her sleeping around doesn't make her a slut in the show. She doesn't identify as a slut, because there's a scene where they call her a slut, and she's like, I'm not. Mm-hmm. So it's not like she's like, I'm going to own the slut thing because I might as well.
She's a very strong character, but she definitely has her vulnerabilities.
So I think what makes her great is that ability for her to have the bond of friendship and all of those things, and the way she sticks up for Otis at the end, even when she's mad at him. Because if there's one thing that there are moments that take me out of it, is that she's got a hard life, but she's a genius. And I think if they only made the fact that she was a genius the thing that bails her out, then it would be lazy. It's a little bit like the way Ray has super force powers. No one really explains why. But what they have for her is what actually makes her powerful is that she overcomes the brokenness to be able to have real friendships and real loyalty. And so for me, what makes her superhuman isn't the fact that she's a genius. And what's going to save her isn't going to be her great grades. It's going to be her relationships with people. And the fact that
you're right. Like, what I appreciated was that the whole culmination of the thing wasn't like, well, Maeve decided to go for that application.
Right.
Like, that's just sort of the typical thing, It's like throughout the whole story, but the big thing is that she decided that she can have relationships with other people.
Yeah.
And even Amy at the beginning, I think we can get into Amy in a second, but Amy and her doesn't make sense to me, because in high school, I don't see how you could be best friends with somebody, but they go with the clique and you don't, and you're okay with that. Like, and then you meet in secret.
Because I think the way that she has relationships is not typical. It's very,
exactly, and that's that to me was a perfect way to say it. And way to say it without saying it.
I think she pities Amy. I think she pities Amy a little bit. I think that, like, between the two of them, she knows that Amy has it harder. So she's pleasantly surprised when Amy comes over to her side, but that wasn't the contingency of their friendship.
No, it's not. And I think that's really interesting, because often that's the big plot line in a teen movie is, by the end, the loser gets the friends. Okay. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or the best friends, the one that becomes popular who was a loser, Mean Girls, then ends up going back with her loser friends. Okay, great. That's not the story between her and Amy, which I appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Amy, let's get into Amy. Her archetype to me is the Gretchen Wieners from Mean Girls.
Right.
That's what Allie and I call her, British Gretchen Wieners.
But she's so much more than Gretchen.
She's so much more interesting than that.
Oh, yeah, and she's a better friend, because in the end, Gretchen doesn't really have that depth and isn't willing to make sacrifices for her friends. She's basically only willing to make sacrifices when she herself is under attack. But what makes Amy a good person is that she just switches because she figures out who she should be loyal to. But I liked Amy. I think they used her a little bit as comic relief, like the way they use Evan Handler's character in Californication, and the way they used.
But that's good. It's nice to have that.
Well, she doesn't take her. She also doesn't take herself too seriously.
Right. Do you guys notice? She, you know how like this whole show is made up of like people who have like adult doppelgangers, and how Maeve is a mini Margot Robbie.
Right? Yeah.
Right. Don't you notice that Amy looks exactly like that other British actress, Felicity? What's her name?
Oh, no, they have weird teeth. Felicity
they
Jones.
look exactly the same to me.
Right,
like,
the actress from Star Wars Rogue
One.
Yes. I feel like they look so much alike.
There's like a tooth thing, maybe.
I'm watching this and I'm going, it's a mini Margot Robbie, it's a mini Felicity Jones, and then that woman looks just like Gillian Anderson. Turns out it was Gillian Anderson.
Good segue.
Which, by the way,
what do you guys think of Gillian Anderson being British? And
I love it.
So
hold on a second.
Their hair.
So good.
So first of all, she's amazing. Second of all, Allie and I watched the movie The Spy Who Dumped Me on the weekend, which, by the way, is 100% a movie you need to watch with Mom. Like,
oh my God!
Mom is visiting soon, so I'm really excited.
Jealous. Mom was just here. I can't believe we didn't think to watch it.
No, that is because Allie and I were imagining Mom in the room, and as a result, we thought it was hilarious and amazing. And not only is Gillian Anderson in it and British, but what's his name? Jamie from Highlander.
Yes, he's in it. I mean, that's the reason to watch it with Mom, or reason to watch it at all.
That's the reason to watch it.
So that one is actually a surprisingly fun movie, but also had like weird connections, because here we are watching Sex Education saying, how's Gillian Anderson being British? And then there's another movie where she plays someone British, and we're like, I guess this is like her thing now.
She's just reinventing herself.
Okay, so let's talk about the jock archetype and how they flipped that one in showing Jackson.
Well, I think, hold on, I want to start off here, because I think what they do is they show the actual reality of what it means to be a jock, or what it means to be someone, not like a jock, but someone who's supposed to be like the best at something. And the truth is, kids these days are under insane amounts of pressure to perform academically, to be at the top of their sport, to do all the intense extracurriculars. And so I think what they're rolling into that is the real anxiety teenagers have. And that's usually, it's imposed upon them by their parents, who have them like involved in 200 activities and need to build a college resume. So to me, it was just like, it was their way of showing the type of pressure that kids are suffering from,
Yeah,
so they build it out into a bigger character than just the jock.
To me, the anxiety was really well dealt with, and was different and was realistic.
No one walks around feeling that perfect and amazing and at the top of their game every minute of every day. It comes with baggage.
To bring up for a second the worst teen movie I've ever seen, which makes me afraid for like our children's generation, that this is the kind of schlock that they'd have to watch. Literally the opposite of Blockers, like what we thought was interesting about Blockers, is The Kissing Booth on Netflix. Like you need someone to write a dissertation about this fucking movie. It is criminal. And one of the worst of parts is this perfect guy. And when they break down to like how difficult it is, it's just so shallow and nothing even, I mean, it's a movie, it's not like a multi-part show, but even then, like the treatment of it is completely like BS compared to how they tackle, I think, Jackson's reality.
Jackson's character felt very real.
And the stuff about him, the two moms who are getting divorced maybe, and the other details about his life, him being head boy, and him not caring that Maeve, like the stuff that you'd think would be the show, the conflict, is not actually it. Like, oh, he's going to choose a girl that's like seen as the slut and the loser in the school. That's going to be a big drama. No, none of his friends say anything to him about that. Do you know what I mean? Like the typical stuff you think is going to be the conflict isn't. He's got his own shit. It's not about her.
And look, and when you when you think about real student athletes in today's day and age, like the ones who are in his situation, it is really hard. It is really admirable how kids are able to juggle all those things and then also be in student council and also get good grades.
Yep.
Oh my God, we definitely, none of the three of us did anything like that for quality.
No, nothing. Not even close.
That's why kids should grow up in Canada.
I don't know. I just came from Canada, and no one's making a case for me right now about Canada.
It's cold.
It is. I don't even want to talk about it. It was so cold.
There.
It was so cold. It was so cold.
You can't do activities, is what you're saying.
There's no activities, and then within 3 days of being there, my kid has an ear infection. She has a horrible cold.
Well, any place, let's be honest, any place you go travel where your kid happens to get sick is tainted for you forever.
Oh yeah, I'm never going back to the Dominican Republic ever.
Well, me neither. I got salmonella there.
But let me just say something about activities in Montreal.
I remember. To wrap up because
I remember let me say something about the activities in Montreal. I remember the activities, and our options were like soap to stone sculpture and chess. No wonder kids don't have or want to do anything there. Okay, so let's go ahead then, and before we wrap, predictions. We haven't even really talked about Otis, who is the heart of the show, but we can all recognize that Asa Butterfield is
amazing. His character's super original, different. He's awesome.
And also the way he plays anxiety, and understanding, just his psychological state. Again, very well thought out, very deep and unexpected.
The show does anxiety probably in teenagers better than anything I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So let's
the alien sex girl. I love her.
Oh my God, I love the alien sex girl. Also, a thing that I read about this show. Oh, sorry, it might be better for our next topic. But anyways, the thing that I read about this. You go.
So as we wrap up, let's talk predictions, evolution, what's going to happen. Name one sort of thread you think is going to happen in next season. I know I have mine.
I mean, I'm hoping that there's some kind of way for Adam and Eric even to be in touch. Like, I don't necessarily expect Adam to be back from military school and they're going to fall in love and get married. I just hope that there's some sort of development, even if it's subtle, there. So I don't in general other predictions. I don't know. I mean, more of everything. I hope it's as good.
I'm worried that what we're going to see is Maeve pining over Otis. I hope they don't do that because it's just too obvious.
But I feel like Maeve doesn't pine.
Right. So what I'm hoping will happen instead is that whereas Otis was her support when she was building the relationship with Jackson, now I'd like to see Maeve being Otis's support as he's having his first relationship and her being that good friend back to him. So that's what I'd like to see, the deepening of the friendship. So
this is where I think the show doesn't deviate too much in the sense that I feel like the show kind of telegraphs where it's going from the beginning. Like the first time I saw Adam and Eric interact, I was like, oh, I'm shipping those two. They're totally ending up together. And the moment Ola popped up on the screen, I'm like, oh, he's going to date her, but he's really in love with Maeve. So what I think is going to happen is he's going to date Ola. He's going to learn how to have a relationship. Maeve is going to pine to a certain degree, which is going to be interesting because it's going to be the first time she's ever pined. And so they're both going to learn valuable lessons that unfortunately Ola's going to be the one that gets hurt in the process. But I think she's amazing. Like
she's great.
She's the most self-aware person in that group. But I think that they're both going to learn lessons that is going to enable to find them way back to each other. Whereas when I first started the show, I did not think that their relationship would be earned. I was like, oh, there's no scenario where she actually ends up with him. I bought his whole thing about the lioness and the cat. And then as they got to the end of the first season, I was like, oh, okay, no, they've earned this. They just have to not Ross and Rachel us too much about this and not make the whole thing about whether or not they get together.
I don't think they will. I think they've been smart. I hope they don't, because I'll say that they have been absolutely smart enough to make it about, like, have those typical things, but not make it about that with this show.
All right.
I love it. It's amazing.
With that huge recommendation from all of us, I told you so to Lily. Becky, where can people follow you?
At Paper BK Princess on Twitter. And I'm shouting out to my sister for this I Told You show.
And Lily? And Lily?
You can follow me, Chichi K. Gomez, as I've said, of the Twitter Gomezes. And Friday Night Movie Pod on Instagram.
And you can follow me at Pancake4Table on Twitter and Instagram. All of our shenanigans on FridayNightMoviePod.com. And of course, we will be at the All-Star Comic-Con in Tyson's Corner, Virginia in June 7th, 8th, and 9th. Thank you for listening. Everybody dance to the music of What Does It Eat. And it was great talking to you guys. See you later.
All right. Love you guys.
Have a good day at work, guys.
Bye.